tell us all about it.
Am I? Thank you. Me toku mihi ki Ngāti Kaununu ki te Wairarapa. So that's thank you to the people of this place for having us here and sharing the beauty of this particular place. I as you probably know, I'm fairly opinionated about printmaking and where it's going. However, I think that for me, this is one of the strongest show of print I've seen for many, many years. I think it's extremely strong, beautifully presented, and you know, there's a lot of work in here. So to be able to hang it as well as Sarah and her team have is an absolute, you know, it's a tough one, and they've achieved really good things. So I thank the gallery for that. Also, having it in a space like this gives significance to a field of creative practice that we know has been marginalised for decades. So I'm going to start just with a statement out of a book about an Australian artist. I'm just going to, and I think that those in the group here that are printmakers will recognise why I'm using this particular phrase. She spread tissue on the cold bed of the press, put down the plate, lifted the damp paper from its sheath of plastic. How fresh it smelt, how white it was. Placed it symmetrically over the zinc, covered it with blotting paper, and felt in swanskin blankets. She then pushed hard and the bed moved forward. She turned the handle relentlessly until she heard a metallic sigh and knew it was through. She lifted the print, bore it away, looked at it where no one else could see. And I think that sums up why some of us continue in this practice. So that's Barbara Hanrahan, who was an Australian printmaker that I have followed for some time. So she's one of my heroes, along with some of the very early Print Council members that are showing here, which is fantastic, including Stanley Palmer and John Drawbridge. One of my heroes was Kate Coulahan. And of course there are my colleagues, Robin White and Rodney Fumston and Dale Copeland, people like that. So that was my early print heritage, and I don't think it could have been stronger, to be honest. Printmakers are very generous, and that group certainly were. However, being part of the new Print Council of Aotearoa, New Zealand has been another consolidating of my interest in print and my willingness, excuse me, to be part of something that is changing and evolving. So the Print Council information, I'm just going to read you a little bit about what's in the front of the catalogue, because although this is a really lovely second way of looking at the catalogue with the video, I'll just read you a little bit. And I started off by saying, you know, we all need a time to celebrate at this time in history. It's been a very, very tough few years. And I think that printmakers have always been good. I'm going to say something really trite like under pressure, but printmakers have always been part of any changes in culture or history or sort of social events. And I hope that we can maintain that sort of ground. So when print moved from, you know, being a peripheral activity to mainstream, many new enthusiasts came on board, and the current Print Council were responsible for that. They saw that print needed to develop and grow. It also needed some new blood. And you know, I'm interested when I talk to printmakers in my sort of vintage, just how many bits and pieces are starting to not work as well as they used to. I think the print is much healthier than it was when I wrote about it about 20 years ago. I think the definitions that have expanded print have worked on our behalf beautifully. Partly, I think, because there are very limited print outlets now, you know, we've been able to sort of take our own path. we've been able to sort of get things in motion without having to feel this huge obligation, to print editions and, keep that sort of high production going all the time. I used to find that extremely difficult, but I did remember when I was printing editions that, I had a tiny little TV in the studio, and I think I started with Days of Our Lives, and I started from about 12 o'clock to 3 watching soap operas as I sort of printed and printed and printed and printed. So again, Print Council, 20 years of Print Council, 20 years of exhibitions and summer schools and workshops and getting people re-educated a little bit about print has been fantastic. And I've seen individuals grow hugely in this period in terms of their ideas about print and their willingness to shift the terrain as far as they possibly can. The publication, as Heather said, is absolutely beautiful. And I don't know of any other publication that's taken on has been incredibly democratic, to be quite honest. Because when I was first involved, we're talking about who would be in this book. And it was just impossible. It was really too difficult. So for people to have their work in this publication, everybody, to have something in there that was a member at the time, I think is an absolute coup. So thank you very much to Diane and Kathy and Heather for maintaining that particular process. So I'm just going to, I guess, just say to you that I really want to at this point acknowledge Ruth Davey. Now, there have been people in my life that have helped me hugely, and as I said before, Print Council is very generous. You can get on the phone and you can have this very sort of strange conversation about how much ground should I put on the plate, how long should it be in the acid, etc., etc. And there will always be a positive response, and I value that sort of exchange of information. But I do want to acknowledge Ruth. She turned 99 in November, I think it was. And I'm working at the moment on the process that she always used oil-based inks and solvents and all of those supposedly nasty materials. And I'm just working on the basis that they haven't harmed her in any way, and she got to 99, so there's still time for this. Miti whakaute nui, Ruth. At an early stage in her career, Ruth realised that print was a standalone art form, highly versatile medium, transcending technique or tradition. She was also aware that print had helped shape culture in all parts of the world, originally used as a form of communication, then a valued artistic medium, but she saw that printmaking could add commentary to what was happening universally, social and political concerns. And the work of Ruth that's in this exhibition is, of course, about the Springbok tour. So she never sort of absented herself from what was happening in her life at that time. She did that in a way that wasn't fist shaking, but it was actually that softly bringing people along with her. She was an eclectic wanderer, and she drew all the time. She went into forests and beaches, she attended concerts and performances, she recorded everyday activities, she was outspoken. And Ruth, while she was walking the walk, she has let her prints do the talking for her, and I find that particularly, I think that's a really good stance to be taking. So some of you will know, that this is about sort of selecting work, that I selected work, have just selected work for the Waikato Society of Arts Painting and Print Award. 10 years ago I found a letter that I had sent to the WSA, which was giving the details of why I thought that was a totally, that printmaking suffered hugely in that particular process. That, that the inequities that I saw in that process was putting print well below painting. So I lost that argument. I don't particularly like losing arguments, as I've got my husband over there will attest to. But I did. I was pretty well put in my place, and I just sort of stepped back. However, at the end of last year, it was mooted that this might change, and was I interested in helping the process of having this, this equally divided in every way. And of course, I jumped at that. It meant that there were a lot of things to consider. That it was essential that the prize money was the same. It was essential that the numbers were not too sort of spread out. And so they agreed to these, and what we have this year is same prize monies, equal numbers. And my cohort in this is Evan Woodruff, who selected painting, and he was very keen that the numbers of entry should stay the same as well. So I was absolutely, I was so pleased to see a high number of print entries, although if I look around the room I'd say that perhaps next year it could be higher again. That would be really good. But when you're selecting work, and this is something I will probably hope to impress on a print council, is that there is a need for digital entries to have detail with them, so that you have the work and you have detail of that, because print is absolutely, it's so difficult to assess what's happening on the surface of this, what's going on with the work, with one single full screen image, even if you stretch it and try and make it bigger, but it's extremely difficult and you don't see it all. So coming into this yesterday, I was a little anxious to see whether what had been selected that it was good, that it would stand by the artists themselves. It was a good recording for them of what they were doing. But I had to, of course, some people didn't get in, and unfortunately I read Facebook a lot and Instagram, and I take on board when somebody says rejection sucks, and I have to say that I've been in those situations myself. I haven't liked it. I've sort of spat and raged a little bit for a while, and then I've got on and carried on making work. So I'm delighted that there are people here that did not get in that show, that are here to still support the Print Council, to support other printmakers, to in fact keep growing in their own practice, because that's the most important thing you can do. The other thing is that I absolutely believe that print is changing significantly, and that's a plus. So in this show we have a mix of autographic, handmade works, we've got some digital work, we've got some works that I would call hybrid, we have some really beautiful works that come off the wall and are installation-based works, all of which tell us all that print is, you cannot say what print actually is. You cannot define anymore what print is. I also know that printmakers, you can spot a printmaker in any opening, because they're the ones that are right up against the glass. They're looking at the edges. They're looking to see what's going on. Has this person got clean paper? Like that, absolutely. We stick out, we do. But I think that current debate puts traditional media not separate from new media, as has often been sort of supposed, but it actually remediates itself through history. We know that screen printing was just, this is just, what the hell's going on with this? It was seen as a very commercial activity, and it was. However, when artists take on board some of these new processes, they change it. I've always been interested to hear that Robin Rauschenberg was very instrumental in making sure the colour copiers did the right thing. So he, his part in that was really important. But we also are our own worst enemy, because what we do is we want to know how it's made. And if we can possibly shift that to what is this work trying to say? What is it trying to convey to the viewer? Is something that I would like to see a shift in. And I'd encourage you all that if you're commenting on one another's work, to ask that question. Put the how did you do that in another place for that, but what were you trying to achieve in this work? What does it say, etc. I don't think you can shift and separate how something's made from what it's doing, but we have been in a really difficult position as printmakers, of only being seen as craftspeople, and it's not the whole story. We know this. So what I'm sort of getting to, I suppose, is how do we change a culture that sees printmaking as some sort of mass production element and not a standalone art field? And it is absolutely, it's still there. How do we get works in public collections? How do we do that? How do we get more shows like this in more public galleries? And unfortunately, we end up by having to do everything. And this is a perfect example. Who does the promotion? The Print Council. Gets the publication? The Print Council. Who's promoting this? The printmakers. You have to do everything, and I don't think that this is something that occurs in other fields of work. And these were questions. Is it the maker's role to educate our audiences? Is it the maker's role to market, promote and advertise our discipline? Is it the maker's role to write and publish about print? Is it the maker's role to create exhibitions, exchanges and print events? And is the same asked of painters and sculptors and photographers? And I think that there's a few heads nodding. It's not asked. And do we accept it or do we try and make change? And I've got no, I'm old. I'm old. However, what we've got, we've got this fascination with print as, all the historical things about its technical functions and its mysteries. And I still would probably question why we have to have all the language and the processes involved in publications. Because if I ask somebody to explain to me how the electrics work on my car, so if somebody said to you, how did you make this lithographic print? And you start to talk about the materials and about water and oil not going to, it's another like this. So do we have to talk about process much at all? I will leave that to you. I mean, we know printmaker to printmaker it's different, but artwork, print to audience, I think is pretty much is difficult. I don't think it's paralleled in any other process. We tend not to say to sculptors, how did you make this bronze, how did you do this bronze work? Because it's either known or it's just accepted that the work is what it is. And I think that, there's a lot that complicit in this sort of, in this problem, and I think we really need to change it if we possibly can. So I think that, some of the work in this show, I think fits quite a few different categories, and that's very pleasing to me. There's installation. We've got installation work that is not new to a lot of printmakers, but I think is more successful here than it has been in some of the other exhibitions that have been called, the boundless works, for example. So because they sort of fit, I suppose, an extended print sort of notion. We've got beautiful works that look at transparency And, I can look around now and I can see where this process of transparency, the thing about pushing it down a little bit by showing us the scratches and the marks and the movement in the works is apparent in this show. I won't particularly point people out. I wanted to stand here in front of this black and white line of work because they're almost all about narrative and storytelling, and we like that. I think as printmakers, we like to see that the work is an underpinning of some sort of experience or event or confrontation or challenge, whatever it might be. Some of you might remember a work I did for the Painting and Print Award. It was called Print versus Painting. It got in. It did get in. But narrative works, for me, draw me into the work a lot. So, I'm trying to sort of, and they don't have to be purely figurative works. It can be narratives and abstraction that you try and find if you can. So these narrative works, I was reminded of a printmaker talking about a very early Japanese printmaker called Munakata, and he was a wood engraver, woodcut artist. He would ink up his block and print it before he did any cutting, and he would say, how can I improve on this? So he had a black square. And what I think is happening in this body of work here is the starting point with something that is pretty beautiful in itself, but trying to add to it and bring it into some sort of position of storytelling and narratives. And we know, some of you, I don't know all of these people. I know some, and I have followed some, but there's some absolutely exquisite work happening all through. I guess I'm a colourist, and when I look across and I can sort of see the difference between this side and that side of work, there's not a better or lesser, it's just another. And we've got a whole lot of new technologies coming in that are going to have to, we're going to have to look at really closely. And, I think one is, say, Aratoi, for example, which is a really old photographic process that's now has come under the banner of printmaking. So, there's all of these things that we can start looking at and trying to not accept, but understand why these processes are being used. But, I have a work that Diane Harris gave me many years ago. It's an etching. And I remember she said how many times it had been sanded back and reworked and scratched and covered up and redrawn and thrown on the floor and picked up and scratched and whatever. And it's in that work. When I look at that work, I know it's heritage. I know what she went through to get that work to a point where she was happy with it. So I think I still think it's a very beautiful work, Diane. But it has got that lovely mark of the maker. And most printmakers do that in some way. There's a mark in that work that I know who that, I know the hand that made that woodcut. I know that person who held the mezzotint rocker. So I'm going off. So that sort of braiding and that sort of scarring and the obliterations, is a little bit like bringing things back into the present, and we examine those. It's about transformation, I think. So how do we come, where do we as printmakers go from here? And I don't have any particular sort of suggestions for that, other than to take risk. The group that I had worked with a really wonderful group of people over at the summer school this year who were prepared to listen to what risk really means to their practice. And it looks to me, having seen some of the new work, that they've taken that on board. It's very, very easy to make a work that's good. But we all know that if we use an expression, oh, that'll do, that what we're saying to ourselves is, I've run out of steam, I can't do any more. I know that if I did something else, it's going to be a stronger piece of work. And that's the point of risk. And I honestly believe that when you take that risk as a printmaker, you produce a much, much stronger work. I've got a work in here that I was puddling along with it. I wasn't liking what I was doing. I was thinking it might just have to go and go into the sort of incinerator close by. And I thought the risk that I have got to take is to cover these 3 plates completely with one colour. And the next risk was, what was that kind of going to be? And if you say brown to somebody, go, brown. And I did. I actually made a plate that completely, it didn't obliterate what was underneath, it pushed it back, and I put this rich brown over the top that would then carry gold as a sort of final marker. But I sweated over that a little bit because it was a big work. It had taken me a long time. It had many layers of print underneath it. And I knew that if I didn't take that risk, it was going to go. I was not going to be able to do anything with it. So I was, really, I knew I had to do that. And I think that happens to a lot of us as printmakers, is just take that risk to push the work just a little bit further. And I really rarely to find out, hear from people that was a mistake. So the other thing, just coming back a little bit, is we've got works in this show that show the skill of the process that's used, but not just the process, but the relationship of that to the content. And so Nan Mulder's mezzotint, for example, of the icebergs. We know Nan is top of the game as far as a mezzotint artist, but sometimes, the relationship of the idea to the process doesn't sit. And I think that in these works, it sits beautifully. We've got very raw, quickly expressive woodcuts. We've got gestural work that comes through with either lithography or with a solar plate process. So we've got the whole gamut of it in here. I think everything. Although, is there anybody that's got work in here that's doing a traditional etching? Right. Yep.
Traditional as in acid?
Yep. Traditional as in not copper sulfate. Traditional as in nitric acid. Remember Ruth Davey? Nitric acid. So etching was at the height of its, very early, and that's something that I realised afterwards, that etching has got into a territory that I think has been sort of put down a little bit because it's seen as being toxic. Now, you can have non-toxic everything, but honestly, copper sulfate's not perfect either. Especially if you do it in a small room, an airless room, and there's all sorts of stuff going on. So, there's still some processes I think that can be revalued and re-looked at and reconsidered. However, we've got people working with gestural work. We've got digital work here, and there's 2 people that I will point out, will just mention, who understand why the digital fits into the print realm. They're not reproductions of paintings that are printed digitally. The ideas are conceived, manipulated within a digital program. So people like Mark Graver, Deborah Crow have been doing this for a long time. That information there's no matrix to it as such. So these are people that I have chosen because I think they understand clearly why digital belongs in the context of a print exhibition like this. There'll be, we're flooded with digital prints. And I do as much as I can to change the language and to say this is not a digital print, this is a digital reproduction, and some people will take that on board and be really positive about it. Others will scream quite loudly, but I think language is really important. So we've got digital here. We've got people understanding the importance of what you can do with a matrix, how far it can go, where you can take it, and does it have to be something fixed forever? I mean, I was fortunate to be in a workshop with Charlie Cohen from Hawaii, and he had masses of MDF boards with imagery on them that he would just exchange and print and then grind them down and remake them and look at the backs of them and whatever and keep printing. And his opinion about high production was that there really was no need to be going into big editions of work, and that there was much more to be gained, I suppose, intellectually and formally by keeping on changing the information, new readings of things. And I know that Nicole, with her screen printing there, is doing that. If I look at, even just in this section here, there's some incredibly innovative work here that would stand up anywhere in any exhibition. And I think that you should feel really proud of this particular show. Every work is an absolute beauty. So with celebration, I think that's PCANZ have certainly put their money where their mouth is over the years, and they need to be absolutely supported for any sort of future developments. I know it's going to change, and Kathy is stepping down, and I would like to publicly acknowledge the incredible work that you and your team have done to get print to this stage where you have a show that is this strong, and it's because of that determination. So, Kathy, thank you hugely, for that. In this show, things fell into these different sort of areas that I've mentioned, I've talked about, but there's still more to come. And I'm particularly interested in looking within oneself to find a sense of where they want to go. I don't find value, I suppose, in making work of something that has not been experienced or seen or thought about. It's really lovely to be able to, go on a trip and come back and do a nice print based on the cobblestones of Rome. However, is that what you really want to be doing? What is that telling us? Nan's look at the ice is about climate change, but it's just beautiful, a beautiful print with ice. You can go any which way with it. Probably the word hybrid is one that we start to consider as printmakers when you're going to be working across different disciplines. If you're working, the inclusion of woodcut with etching, with screen printing, with whatever is a very new approach to print, and it's an exciting one. And we're at a stage where we can certainly keep moving with that. So what I think it takes print to an edge that's exciting. I think it takes it, you can call a hybrid print something else. You could call it a mixed print. You could call it mixed media. And there's also a collage sort of emphasis on that too. However, hybrid for me sort of sits quite comfortably because it's still within a sort of print language, and I'm very interested in that. There are works here that are simply about the materials that are being used, and get to sort of investigate those. I don't think we're under any pressure anymore to try and define print and what originality actually is. It puts us in an impossible situation. The breadth of the medium is that many critics and writers ignore the breadth of print and adhere to the old original definition, a dated and much less useful one as to where we are today. However, I think there's openings for more rigorous and informed debate that could encompass issues of representation, identity, narrative, that could push us even further. In essence, an expanded field of print. So there's a couple of questions that I would like to sort of throw at you. How many of you in the audience consider print to be your main source of art making? Cool. Good. Has there been anybody that's been influential in your life that has pushed you into print? Or has Joe? Marty Vrader. Because that's really important to acknowledge as well, is if you've got some people who will keep encouraging you, and keep saying, this looks like it's for you. I met up somewhere who'd gone through art school with me, who was taught by the print lecturer at art school in the 60s, and if I can't remember the dates exactly, because remember it was the 60s, all sorts of things happened in the 60s. But printmaking at Elam was a nightmare, and at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the print lecturer would remove the blankets from the press and lock them away, and put a big lock on the acid baths and all those sorts of things. And I still tell people that actually I failed print in my second year at Elam. It was not a great experience. However, I sort of recovered. Fortunately, I recovered. But the key person for me was actually Bonnie Quirk, who taught me. I went to a summer school. I tried to get into painting, was full up, so I said, I can't go to print. I needed to get away. And Bonnie Quirk was taken, and when I walked into the print department, my nostrils started sort of flaring a little bit. I had that lovely sort of sparkly feeling of being in the right place at the right time, and that hasn't changed. I still find going into print workshops the most exciting place to be for me. And some of you have been on residencies, and you know what that feeling actually is. So, can I ask if you're positive about print today? Is everybody positive about print? Are you worried that there are not as many print outlets as there used to be? Does it matter? You are? I am a little, I have to say, because that pushes us all into an online type of selling. That is really difficult, because once again we're managing our own professional career ourselves. So when I was working, there were several print specialists across the country, and now that's not the case. However, we are still making print, and we're still getting it out there. So I would keep encouraging you to put it wherever you possibly can. The one thing that I would say to all of you is that if you as printmakers want to be taken really seriously, professionally, you have to create a body of work. You need to put yourself out there and have an exhibition. It's great to do one-off works perhaps for shows, thematic shows, but I would say to you, create a body of work and then go and put it alongside a catalogue or a piece of writing. Because as I think Heather said, or Kathy, these exhibitions go, the works go, they go spread into the ether somewhere, but that catalogue, the piece of writing and a visual record, is really important to do that. And you can ask, look at you can ask each other to write for you. It doesn't have to be, some sort of heavy theoretical diatribe. It can be something between friends. And the writing that I had done for my catalogue in Hastings was with an old friend. She said she would like to do it. And we can do that for one another. And that's what I would encourage you to think about, is helping one another by writing something. It could be a piece of poetry, it could be a short film. Where's Graham? Is Graham here? Love that series, that film that was done recently. So who's responsible for that?
His partner. Lee and paid the videographer to do it.
Well, more of those.
The present, yeah.
More of those. That was fantastic. A short snip. Graham Hall, printmaker, talking about his work. You know, his work is here. It's really important to do that. And yes, you know, if we have to keep doing it, we will keep doing it. But how nice it would be not to, not to have to. So I think that a couple of things just before I go. Or before, I would like to sort of hear from any of you just about what your experiences are about being a printmaker and where you think you might go with it. So, anybody having a great time as a printmaker or a not great time?
Always having a great time.
It's the ink stuff, isn't it? Yeah.
And I have to say that Artist Open Studios in Wanganui has been incredible for me because I'm a real novice printmaker. And Catherine started the Wanganui Artist Open Studios, 20-something years ago? But that for me is an objective in March to make a body of work. And it's so good because you have this every March, I know I've got to kick butt, make a body of work, but then it also gives me work that I can go up country and try and sell it to some gallery that doesn't know who I am.
Yeah.
Having something every year to work towards.
And it doesn't mean a huge amount of work. I mean, it might be 10 or 15 works that you go, and in and around a particular idea or theme, and that would be something else. I mean, I'm not saying create. When I say a body of work, I mean a cohesive body of work. It was hugely sort of rewarding for me when we were in Auckland a few months ago to actually see Robin's White's work en masse and to be totally absorbed in somebody who has spent a lifetime working with print. But when you go to an exhibition where you get this, we talk about body or group of work, you get to know the maker so much better. You get to be able to see where they're coming from and what they're thinking about. I think with, as I said before, having to produce editions, there's no thinking in there. As I say, days of our lives. Woohoo! Something nice about them stacking up, but it is really labour intensive, and I think that it's better to maybe run smaller editions. How many of you? What are your edition numbers? What are yours? 10.
Oh, easily less than 10, probably 4 or 5.
Good numbers, not the 50, 60, or if you, in the olden days 120 or 150 or whatever it was. Small editions will keep you making new work. They means that you've got work that you can distribute. You've got, you can give it away, you can sell it, you can show it, but it's also saying, hey, I've got to make some more work now. I've got to do that. Get the money underway. So, have any of you got any questions for me? Hey.
Hi, I have a statement, sorry. Not only do you, when you see a body of work exhibited in a beautiful space, you learn about that artist, but if you have an opportunity as an artist to put your body of work up, you learn so much more about what you've done and where you're going. So, it's really hard to have that opportunity in this day and age to be able to see your own body of work up, lit well, presented, and that is what I wanted to say.
Yeah, that's good. It's
a lot about yourself.
once you take work out of a studio context and you put it in a designated space, and it's just your work, then you get a much better understanding of who you are too and where you're going with it, and also be able to make decisions about where next and making those selections. And I'm really reluctant to sort of talk about the period where it was really exciting in this country. It was the 80s, really exciting. A lot of work being made, a lot of work being shown. a lot of it been collected. But you know, it's new. We just keep doing it. And you know, we can grumble a bit, and we can talk about the what ifs. But you know, I think that we just keep going. Yeah, one foot after the other. Yeah.
I'm not sure about the actual science, but I find pricing really difficult.
I can't hear very well. So can you either speak up or come a bit closer?
Oh, sorry, I'm just saying I find it difficult to price slowly.
Okay.
As well.
It's really hard to price because I think printmakers underprice hugely, and you know I come from Kawhia and we have a small gallery there, and you know this is not print, but in general that the artists showing there are really pitching their work. It's really low, and printmakers I think have come in. It was fine to have a modest price when you were running a big edition. So if your works were $100, as some of mine were in the 80s, and I ran, you know, there were 50, then that was an accumulative amount of money, but it is really difficult to do. You can never, ever price by how long it takes you to do something, but painters know that as well. You know, that's just the way it is. I think what you do is you do look at your peers, you do look and see where you fit, and if you're a new printmaker, you ask the questions. You fire a question onto the Print Council website and say, hey, you know, what do you think about this? You open up a dialogue about it, because you know, print, when it was regarded as a very democratic art form, available to everybody, it's not quite the same anymore. And I do think that if you put your print, you know, if you put the price high, you have to just stand by it. I think I was saying to Joanna, framing is another big issue, and you know, I nearly had I know that cardiac arrests are really my husband's territory, but I nearly had one when I was told the price of how much this work was going to cost me, and you can't. It's either gets framed or it doesn't get framed, quite honestly. I think it's a real problem. Sorry?
I'm quite interested on the other side of framing as well, and what does the frame bring to the room, what does the frame take away from you? And, you know, and what are people thinking about while they're making the work in terms of presenting the work?
I'm not thinking much, I have to say. But you're right. You know, most of the a couple of little things happened with the painting print award in Hamilton. It's coming up very soon, and that is a couple of works were meant to be just pinned straight on the wall, and somebody else wanted the works just to be held by magnets, and I think that's perfectly okay. Long term, it doesn't help the work, because you know it's going to get damaged if it hasn't got some sort of frame around it. But I've been into shows that have the works have just been hung on magnets, and they look fantastic, and the framing is over to somebody who might possibly buy it. It's the other side of that, of course, is, you know, how many of us, once we do see it in a frame, have just a little lift and sort of it's just, you know, that just is something that either just finishes it off and you're willing then to leave it. But framing, I think you just have to find somebody who will frame your work well, and is not going to make you take out a third or fourth or fifth mortgage. Sorry?
Our experience with the exhibitions is we do a lot of exhibitions at the Print Council that aren't framed, simply because it means they're easily sent around the country and they're little. But if something's going to be hung for a period of time, like here, for 3 months, if they're not framed work and the intention is that they should be framed, they just get very tired after 3 months on the wall unframed. You know, they have a tendency to possibly slip on the floor and get damaged. And I think that's, the framing is a protection from the work.
Unframed works under strong lighting, they'll start to curl very, very quickly. And then the work starts to look not so good. So, I mean, there's obviously different ways of doing it. And of course, a frame is not letting you get right close up to the work. But I tell you, I think printmakers can see through glass. That used to go right up. I do like being behind these two works. I think that they are very poignant portraits, and not work that I had, wanted to see them in the real work. These were a couple of those ones. There are all of these sorts of questions. Anybody working on paper is going to be facing the same thing. Whether you're a drawer, people who paint directly onto paper, watercolours, for example, they're all facing that thing about, do I get it framed or do I not get it framed? And I would never get anything framed before putting it work forward for any sort of selection process. I just really hold off that. So if the work is selected, then you can go and get the framing. And most organisations will give a month or more after selection to get that work on the wall. But I'm not, I think it's a wee bit of a nightmare. Kathy, of course, who was able to say that, doesn't have to worry about framing because she's working in a very three-dimensional way. Was that deliberate?
Initially, absolutely.
Yep.
I thought, how can I present print and not have to frame it? That was the beginning of where I often make works now.
Just one thing, Charlie Cohen, when he came to New Zealand some years ago, he had works that he had waxed, and that the show that I had in Hastings, I had some of those. I put wax on them, ironed wax into the paper, and it became like a ceiling. I did something different. It changed things. I was aware that would happen, but he presented. He had a whole lot of work, quite about this sort of size, and they were waxed. And they were absolutely beautiful, and they just hung on the wall, didn't need any framing. They were just pinned on the wall, looked absolutely stunning, and you knew that they were sort of protective. I mean, and wax is a beautiful material to use. Wax, Jung talks about wax as holds memory, and I liked that notion of why that material as opposed to polyurethane or something else. But the other thing I've used a lot on print is beeswax, shoe polish, all of those things. Beautiful, stains into the paper, protects the print, adds another layer of interest to it, and it isn't sort of shiny. So have a think about that. I did make a little bit of a mistake when I was waxing these works. They were pinned directly on the wall. So, but when I was waxing those works, I used the family iron. Thought I'd cleaned it really well. Heated it up, saw the wax drop out of little holes, got those cleaned up, whatever. And I don't iron, but John sometimes irons. And so a few shirts had a bit of wax on them. All fun. Okay, are there any more? Hey, Faith.
I'd like to share that in Forest Street, my city, and in the city, we've got 20 picture frame and cut mat. And I think that's still forever. I frame all my own work, you can be very cunning about it. So I'd like to encourage people not to be afraid to really have a cut mat. Maybe we need to come to some school. And the other one I'd really like to share, picking up on this taping, my experience with some international Mexican shows was New Zealanders are incredibly brave in risk taking because I found a lot of the work quite conservative.
Okay, yep.
Constrained. And so I think sometimes we need to step back and take a good look at ourselves and think how free. Look at us around us. There's such a lot of risk taking here, people aren't pushing the boundaries. And I think we don't know what we don't know, but if you look at some of the international shows, they're so predictable and conservative. Beautiful imagery, but they're not pushing it.
But New Zealanders have been very successful in international shows. I mean, you have, Graham had, a lot of you have put work forward for shows and have been really successful. I'm absolutely with you with the framing thing, because at art school we used to be taught how to stretch canvas and make gesso and do all of those sorts of very sort of practical sort of things. And I do think that we certainly could do much better with that, learn how to do that. Is anybody, I have not put work into shows outside the country, partly because I've just never got anything done in time. But what are your responses to that? Do you get treated well, Faith? Yeah?
I mean, you have to pick and choose, but I think once you start networking with other international artists that are putting out there, they will share the ones that they follow and the ones not to be involved with. Financially, it can vary. Some of the fees to exhibit can be very, very high. €250, that kind of thing, so you've got to be very, very careful. But I think the networking it provides is just invaluable. Absolutely invaluable.
As I would say with conferences and sort of impact, at all of those you get some interesting, get to meet your global tribe, sort of, yeah.
I think we need to be really aware of the opportunities internationally that are there for printmakers. A few years ago I got asked to do a presentation at one of the first Australian Palladium, where I met a lot of people who I continue to work with now regularly. And because I've got that relationship, I exhibit frequently over in Australia, and they're always welcome. Not everywhere, a lot of them say you have to be an Australian, end of story. But if you do have an Australian friend that you work collaboratively with, then they seem to brush over the fact that there happen to be a miscellaneous New Zealander that's crept in. So they're there, and it certainly expands the not only perhaps your name, but you see work that you wouldn't see while you're just exhibiting in New Zealand. It certainly expands your horizons when you view work. And yes, I do, they're there. It's just a matter of looking and thinking, yeah, I need to get that work in there in time. That often is the biggest problem. Especially to begin with Australia.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's the status of print in Australia is huge. It's really, really good. I mean, they're going through have been through some sort of similar situations as we have, but print is still very, very strong. Wonderful specialist galleries promoting, and it's just one of the things. But we'll still keep making in any case. Some
and our work is exciting. It is different because you're right. We go where a lot of Australians would not even think of going as far as print goes. So, yeah.
I think, when I talked about, me having some print heroes here, I do have some as well, globally. There are print artists that I just think are outstanding, and, I will follow people like, the works of Paul Arago and Louise Bourgeois and David Hockney, and although I'm not so hot on immersive, sort of, I won't go there. But, there are those out there, Kiki Smith, people who understand, who are artists who understand why they make print. They're not artists who are part of a cabal associated with a big dealer gallery who just take a work and send it off to get it screen print, colour separated and screen printed without any sort of touch, without any sort of impact on there. I have, obviously, as you know, I've got a lot to say about that, but we'll finish here. So I'll just at the moment, I'll just talk to you that, I like the idea that printmakers are nomadic. I like the idea that that we move freely between tradition and contemporary practices. I like the idea that we're okay about new territory and challenging that sort of territory. And I'm also okay that when the going gets tough, we keep going. We sort of emerge stronger. This show is an absolute, it's a hard as hell show to hang. 90 odd works or whatever. in a relatively, it would seem like a big space when there wasn't work in it, but it's been able to sort of show some works that are certainly doing the very, very best printmaking that I think I've seen. The other thing is I used to argue about there's no point in us moaning in the fringes. No point there. We've got to get into the mainstream and shout very loudly. Proof is one. That publication is one trajectory that's going to do that for us, and I hope that we appreciate that. So for print to survive, not just survive but to grow, I think we need to recognise that where we fit into contemporary art practice, and that the inclusiveness about opportunities, more favourable circumstances for situations. But I also think open debate about it is probably where we need to go. We need to talk a lot more about why are we doing what we're doing and why is it important, and try and tap the people who are able to be our advocates in galleries and in publications, for example, anything like that. We just need to form those connections and hope that some of us get the chance to be able to sort of have voice in amongst that. So there we go. Does anybody want to challenge me, give me a hard time? I've got the exits well sorted, I have to say. I don't take the selection process lightly. I find it incredibly difficult, to the point where I don't know whether I will do it again anywhere. But please know that that when you put work forward, it's looked at and looked at and looked at and gone back again and looked at, and that it's not a once over lightly ever. I'll leave you on that. Thank you very much.